Nigerians all obey to serve our Father's land with love and strength and faith. The labor of our heroes past shall never be in vain. To serve with heart and might, one nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Please be seated. Of the opening ceremony, Mr. Ekpo Nta, who is also chairman of the National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission. My Lord, the head of the National Industrial Court of Nigeria, heads of various government parastatals here present, the representative of the head of service of the Federation, the director of the International Labour Organization here in Nigeria, very distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. For those who have been in this country long enough, there is a clear recognition that in recent decades, our dear country has suffered from what is clearly a crisis of compensation. And the clearest manifestation of this crisis is the frequency, and some would add duration, of industrial actions, some of them wide-eyed actions, embarked upon in various sectors of the economy with the crippling effect that also has on productivity. And so unless you are keenly interested in a particular sector, you sometimes ask yourself, today, the very well-known one, ASU is on strike, they've called off that strike. Resident doctors, they are on strike. JHSU, health workers, they are on strike. And from time to time, you hear also of teachers, NUT proceeding on strike. And just about 20 years ago, in 2003, we all recall, police also went on strike. And so, for the next 2 days, beyond this opening ceremony, there will be 8 technical sessions devoted to examining the compensation management in Nigeria, resolving dilemmas and mainstreaming milestones. The Policy Forum is under the auspices of the Michael Imodu National Institute for Labour Studies, and in collaboration with the National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission and the Edward Stick Foundation, which is very well known. And the Labour Institute is the foremost think tank on labor issues. And so we had a lot to deal with in the course of the next 2 days. And to the best of my knowledge, of course, we will be hearing from the chieftains of the Labour Institute, and those will include the chairman who is here in our midst of the Governing Council, and also the Director General of the Institute. It's probably the first time that we are having focused attention on compensation challenges in our country. And out of the deliberations and conclusions, perhaps we may yet have a pathway in resolving some of these nagging issues. So once again, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we will, in the course of the program, have recognitions of the dignitaries who are here in our midst, but you'll permit me very quickly to recognize Mrs. Vanessa Pala, who is the ILO Country Director here in the Abuja office. Mrs. Pala, it's our pleasure to have you in our midst this morning. We also have, I mentioned his name earlier, the chairman of the Governing Council of the Michael Imodu National Institute of Labor Studies, Chief Sam Onokowomo. Chief Sam Onokowomo, we're glad that you're here. The chair of the opening session, I earlier mentioned his name as well, Mr. Ekpo Unta, learned chairman of the National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission, is also in our midst. The Director General of the Labour Institute, Comrade Issa Aremu. Comrade Issa Aremu, good morning and welcome. My Lord President, National Industrial Court, Honorable Justice Kanyib, will be delivering the keynote address on this occasion, but it's my honor and privilege to welcome you to the opening ceremony. We also have the chairman. You can see the mic logo here. It's already indicating that. We also have the chairman of the ICPC, that is the Independent Corrupt Practices and Related Offences Commission, Professor Bolaji Owasonye, learned senior advocate of Nigeria. You know, when you overpay and you run into financial crisis, we hear sometimes we have to borrow money to pay salaries. At what level, I'm not quite sure. But there is a department of government that keeps an eye on how well we are doing with our borrowings. And the Director General of the Debt Management Office, Ms. Patricia Oniha, is here in our midst. Ms. Oniha, welcome to the program. Health, they say, is wealth. And we'll be grappling with the health insurance scheme to be sure that we're able to pool our resources so that those who are sick take advantage of the resources available without necessarily having to pay out of pocket. Professor Sambo, Executive Secretary of the National Health Insurance, is here with us. It's now the NHIA. We're glad that you're here. Earlier, I saw Engineer Aziz. He's the Director General of NIMC, that is the National Identity Management Commission. Engineer Aziz, if he's still here in our midst, I saw him a while ago. Let me also respectfully recognize the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission, Tony Ojoku, learned senior advocate of Nigeria, and most recently, recipient of the National Honor of OFR. The Defense Headquarters has been represented by Major General G.K. Nwosu. General Nwosu, good morning and welcome. There is also in the audience, I was teasing him a moment ago, whether he was asked to listen in on today's proceedings as well as tomorrow's. His name has cropped up in the course of the resolution of the crisis generated by the ASU strike. Former Vice Chancellor of the University of Port Harcourt, Professor Mimi Briggs. Professor Lily Briggs. We're glad that you're here with us. So as I said, we'll have recognitions in the course of the opening ceremony. May I, at this time, respectfully invite the chairman of the opening ceremony, Mr. Egbo Unta, to give his opening remarks. Mr. Chairman.
Good morning. Good morning. It's unfair to punish persons who come in early for occasions and have to wait for others, and that's why we have decided to start. Ask me what happened in 2011. You won't ask? 2011, November, the former president swore in members of the board of ICBC. I was a board member, and we had a chairman-elect, and we're all at the villa. A few minutes before the swearing in, we were told that there would be a change of plan. And so board members should come in, and we all went in. And the reason given was that certain dots had to be put on the I and the T's crossed. And so, Ipunta would act as chairman, pending when the chairman's position would be confirmed. 2011. Now 2022, November, your chairman on page 12, you have the program. Are we in agreement? You've seen him? Yeah. I was told a few minutes ago that I would act as the chairperson, as the chairman of this occasion again. I don't know what will happen in the next 11 years. That's just an aside. But the truth of why we gather here today is that when I joined the ICPC, we noticed a lot of infractions that had to do with public officers who decided to pay their own salaries ahead of time. And committed all kinds of infractions. Little did I know that I would end up with the Salaries Commission. Now, in the course of serving on the board of the National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission, I met Comrade Isa here, who were both board members. And we used to discuss that how do we bring all these problems of compensation to an end? This reoccurring, would we serve in this organization and leave without changing the narrative? A few years later, he was appointed as the DG of the Michael Imodu National Institute for Labor Studies. And I could see what we had been discussing coming to fruition. At this point, I would like to welcome the representative of the SGF. You're welcome. And so this battle has been on between the two of us, that we must see an end to this reoccurring compensation crisis in this country. And I stand here today with him. We are very proud of your presence. As a matter of fact, we had decided that we were not, for the first time, we were not going to speak. We would only listen. Michael Imodu, Salaries Commission, this is not the time for us to speak. We want to feel the pulse of everybody when it comes to compensation. And I have seen one or two organizations that have come here because they have a pending request with Salaries and Wages Commission. Please indicate if you have one with us. Yes, I'm happy we are all here. And maybe by the time we finish this two-day discourse, we would have made very substantial progress. I want to especially recognize my successor in ICPC, because a lot of recoveries that have been done in the public sector has reinforced the feelings we've always had. I will give you a small example. The estimated personnel budget for 2023 is 4.99 trillion. I'm hoping that at the end of 2023, he will give us a clear analysis of what has gone on there, because we have been very, very serious about monitoring capital projects in this country. We put in a lot of elaborate checks. We also monitor overhead expenditure. But the least monitored has always been personnel, because government assumes that everybody who has been put on your personnel list is really there. I would not want to take your time. My function is simply to welcome you all to this occasion. And I would like to say that here, we are going to speak our minds very freely, very, very freely, very freely. And all your thoughts would count. Whatever you feel in your heart should be put in place. Please voice it out. We've gone beyond the blame game level. Let's salvage our compensation policies. It's biting all over the world. And I do know that, fortunately, the federal government has not had to lay off any staff during the COVID period up to date. When you see what has happened in other countries, then I think we've done well in that direction. And so there must be some kind of reciprocation in that respect. Many agencies and organizations all over the world are beginning to cut back. I know that BA has cut off about 10,000 workers Facebook has joined, and all because of inflation and whatever reasons have been given. But I'm very sure that the way we got around Ebola and the way we managed our COVID experience, we would also find novel ways of going together as a family. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. That's the chairman of this occasion, here represented by the DG of National Salaries and Wages Commission. Good morning, the chairman, representative of the Secretary to Government of the Federation, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. My name is Cecile Egbeli. I appreciate your presence here. I join Kingsley to sincerely apologize that we are beginning behind our originally scheduled time. But as quickly as possible, we'll run through the rest of the opening ceremony. I understand a couple of us need to attend to other engagement. Of course, this is Monday, and there's so much engagement and official matters to attend to. Permit me to very quickly recognize a couple of names here. I would like to recognize and appreciate the presence of the Honorable Commissioner for Compensation, Honorable Dr. Mrs. Mojisola Yaya Koladi. You're welcome, ma'am. I would also like to respectfully welcome the Director General, Nigerian Employer Consultative Association, Mr. Adewale Oyerinde. He's also here with us. The Director of the Resident Representative, Frederick Herbert Stiftung Nigerian Office, Mr. Daniel Manu, I understand he was here. I don't know if I still see him here, but nonetheless, I would like to recognize and appreciate Mrs. Remy Hejirika. She's also of the Frederick Herbert Stiftung Nigerian Office. She's here. Please, let's see you. Okay, thank you very much and welcome. The Director General of NAPTIP, Dr. Fatima Waziri Azi, thank you very much for taking time to be here. Dr. Famous Esedo, Director representing the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Communications, is also here with us. Dr. Remy Oyewumi, representing the National Security Advisor, thank you very much for coming around. I would also like to welcome the Director General, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, Mr. Shegun Ajayi Kadiri, also here with us. Comrade Ismail Bello, representing the President of NUC, thank you very much. Mr. Bashman Mohammed, representative of the country, Program Director, American Center for International Labor Solidarity, is present here. We have a representative of the Inspector General of Police, CP Ishaku Mohammed. I thank you very much for being here. Also represented here today is the FCT Minister, and the FCT Minister is here represented. Please, who's the representative of the FCT Minister? Please, let's see. Oh, thank you very much, sir. Malam Bashir Mohammed, MNI. President ASU, Professor Emmanuel Oshodeke, is also here with us. I thank you very much for gracing us with your presence, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. The Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission, represented by the Executive Commissioner, Corporate Services, Alhaji Ibrahim Boyi, thank you very much for coming around. Alhaji Haruna White Abdullahi, Acting Executive Chairman, FCT Inland Revenue. Thank you very much for coming. EFCC Chairman is also represented here by Mr. Pamanga Bello. We will have a couple more recognitions as we continue, but very quickly, permit me to call on the Director General of the Michael Imodu National Institute for Labor Studies, to please Comrade Issa Aremu, MNI, to please come up the podium and give us your welcome address. A round of applause for him.
Actually, after almost close to 2 years, being appointed as the Director General of the Labour Institute, I would like to confess that I'm still in a transition mode. Coming from trading union background, once a comrade, always a comrade. And when I looked at this audience, I thought we need to find a way to warm up the place a little bit in a comradely way. I hope my chairman will indulge me, chairman of our governing council, to say, especially for some of my comrades who are here, I would like to say, Isoleto. Africa, and by their response, we know those who live above minimum wage. Isoleto. There is victory for us. There is victory for us in the struggle for our members. There is victory for us. And NSC President just come. Please, let's welcome him forward and backward, never in the struggle for our men. But there is victory. Isoleto.
Leave Africa.
I would like to respectively adopt all the recognitions that have been made by the Master of Ceremony, Mr. Kisley Osadolo, the art journalist from NTA. But in a special way, kindly permit me to recognize the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, our special guest, Mr. Boss Mustafa, ably represented here by Dr. Morris. Please, a special round of applause for him. I would also like to recognize my Lord, the President of National Industrial Court, Honorable Justice Benedict Gaib. I think it's nice to adopt all the previous recognitions, but let me welcome the President of Nigeria Labour Congress, Comrade Ayuba Waba. He is also the President of International Trade Union Confederation. I know he's time pressed because he's about to leave for the convention of ITUC in Australia. I feel quite delighted to welcome all to this historic, important two-day policy forum on wages and compensation management in Nigeria. This gathering confirms the validity of the wisdom that the sum of us is better than one of us. Today's event is a product of collaboration and partnership between the critical national and international labor market institutions, as well as stakeholders dealing with salaries, and Wages Administration. My institute, Michael Imodu National Institute for Labor Studies, through regular courses and academic diploma and degree programs, has been building capacity for organized labor, employers of labor, as well as government officials on collective bargaining as a tool for wage negotiation and industrial harmony since 1983, in line with its mandate. The Institute is rightly named after the irrepressible labor number one, comrade, Chief Michael Imodu, who under the British colonialism fought for trade union rights, wage improvement, and decent work for railway workers, who were then suffering under the colonial exploitation. Established in 1993, the National Salaries, Income and Wages Commission, which is currently under the Dynamic Digital Executive Chairman, Professor Echo Inter. Please let me give me a special round of applause. The Commission has rich experiences and a lot of data on matters pertaining to remuneration in the federal public service, data on national minimum wage determination, review of pensions, research into public service pay, including comparability survey between public and private sector pay system. Almost a century-old Frederick Ebert Foundation was founded in 1925. It is the first German political foundation named after the democratically elected president of Germany, Frederick Ebert. FES is 46 years old now in Nigeria, promoting robust partnerships with trade unions, institutions like MINILS, or trade union education with respect to enhance capacity building, collective actions, effective collective bargaining, representation, and delegations, which are primary functions of trade unions. We are quite privileged to equally partner with the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, as well as the Office of the Head of Service. And I can see Mrs. Hapan, who also came here to represent the Head of Service. Please help me appreciate her with a special round of applause. It's also very, very heartwarming to see the quality of our special guests who have really turned up today. We are even more excited to have organized labor represented here by Nigerian Labour Congress, as well as TUC, and the affiliate unions of the two labor centers. The primary mandate of trade unions is to improve welfare of workers through wage negotiation. That will definitely lead to collective agreements. The organized labor bring to this conversation today, I hope, century-rich experience gathered in the struggle for living wage in Nigeria. In our midst also, we are privileged to have the country director of ILO, who has been ably, very well recognized, my dear sister, comrade Mrs. Vanessa Pala, who the Emir of Ilorin gave the special name of former Omopowale. The last time she visited us in Ilorin, we took her to the palace, and our Emir gave her the name Omopowale. You're welcome. ILO is the oldest agency of United Nations. It marked 100 years anniversary 3 years ago. It opposed the vision of the world based on social justice in the world of work. The recent wave of global wage-related strikes and protests indicates that wage income poverty is a danger to prosperity everywhere. The recent ILO Global Wage Report of 2020-2021 dealing with wages and minimum wages in the time of COVID-19 shows that there has been a downward pressure on the level as well as growth rate of average wages in 2/3 of the countries under survey. I agree very well with ILO with the conclusion that the world needs urgently wage policies for human-centered global economic recovery post-COVID. The International Labour Standards, called conventions, are legal instruments drawn up by the ILO constituents, setting out basic principles as well as rights in the world of work. It is therefore gratifying that here we have a good mix of relevant critical stakeholders on compensation matters within the Nigeria and international space. This program is also very, very timely, and I agree with Professor Itayeko. Our conversation on wage and salary administration is taking place on the eve of another democratic transition in Nigeria. There cannot be political democracy without economic democracy through fair distribution of national incomes as staged by the 1999 Constitution. I want to say here that the next election will be determined by employment-labor relations, the critical component of which is job creation, wage and productivity improvement for national development. We are hopeful, therefore, that this activity will go a long way in engendering objective and incisive policy outcomes. The theme of this policy forum, I think we are quite familiar with that. It is resolving dilemmas, reinforcing milestones with respect to compensation management. We have chosen this consciously with the view of the fact that we can promote conversation. And I agree with Professor Itra, the chairman of Wages and Salary Commission, that we should feel free to have frank discussions on wage administration in Nigeria. But in doing so, I also want us to recognize that there are already existing milestones which we must be able to recognize and build upon. Nigeria is an activist ILO member since we became independent in 1960. And Nigeria is very well committed to decent work agenda. The country has ratified 42 international labor conventions since 1960. I think we should appreciate Nigeria because many countries have done that. I bear witness that on the 8th of November in Geneva, and Comrade Ayuba Waba was also a witness to that ceremony, the Honorable Minister of Labor, Dr. Chris Ngigi, representing President Muhammad Buhari in Geneva, ratified and deposited latest two conventions on occupational safety and health, 2006, number 187, as well as the Convention on Violence and Harassment, dealing with violence and harassment in the world of work, Convention 190. The most relevant convention to our conversation today is the one dealing with minimum wage fixing, Convention of 1970, which again Nigeria has really ratified. And with this ratification, Nigeria has established textile workable minimum wage fixing machinery, capable of ensuring sustainable minimum wage negotiations over the year. Similarly, 1999 Constitution, also advocate for a social order founded on ideas of freedom, equity, and justice. As a matter of fact, Section 17.3 A to E of the Constitution lends support to the provision of national minimum wage to the citizens. Since 1981, Nigeria has brought about robust legacy of 5 minimum wage negotiation backed by acts of parliament through commendable executive parliament collaborations over the years. And here I want to salute the organized labor for putting pressure to improve on the living wage as well as minimum wage of Nigerian workers. We've signed 5 national minimum wage agreement, which has been backed up by the Act of Parliament. And this is very remarkable because South Africa, it's only 2 years ago that South Africa started implementing minimum wage, which we have been doing since 1981. It is therefore clear that Nigeria already has significant milestone for wage negotiation. I want us to bear this in mind during our conversation. President Muhammad Buhari is commendably committed to decent work agenda through labor-friendly policies for labor motivation and productivity. And I think whatever we want to say, regardless of the current challenges that we're having, it is clear that some measures have been taken to promote decent work in Nigeria. And I would like to concur with Professor Ita that is very significant, despite recession 1, recession 2, as well as COVID lockdown. President Buhari has resisted all the pressure and temptation to retrench workers. And this is very, very remarkable, because when you talk of wage improvement, it's only those who are working who can collect salaries. If you don't have jobs, you cannot do that. We recollect that between 2005 and 2007, public service went through a series of downsizing, retrenchment. In fact, close to 35,000 workers were retrenched in public service. And yet there was no recession that time, no COVID. I think we need to appreciate President Buhari's administration for this remarkable achievement. Then not only that, the President and this administration in particular, despite the shortfall in revenue, has kept faith. Payment of salaries of public servants is consistent, as I went due. And even when close to 26 states of the Federation were facing challenges of non-payment of salary, federal government also gave bailout 1 and 2, include up to 3, to help the state government to cope with challenges of crisis of compensation. So I'm saying here that this is one milestone that we must consolidate upon. I don't want to sound as if I'm being political, but the bottom line is that the facts speak for themselves. Then we can also mention the effort of the federal government after the organized labor put pressures to improve minimum wage from 18,000 to 30,000 with all the consequential adjustments that have been paid with them. Again, this was also done without retrenchment of the workers. I also know that there was a bold intervention to create jobs in 1,000 jobs in 774 local governments, between year 2020 and 2022. Again, this is all part of the decent work agenda. So I'm saying here that we must factor this in our narrative, that we can only build on this achievement, we couldn't reverse it, which means that key to wage improvement is job security. Of course, there are some dilemmas that we must also address today. The late Pope John Paul is a very progressive Pope, and I think he deserves a special round of applause posthumously. He once observed that a just wage for the workers is the ultimate test of whether any economic system is functioning justly or not. I think in our conversation, we should be able to answer, provide answers to frequently asked questions. You know, is our wage system very fair today? You know, do worker salary take them home? I think it is clear that with problems of challenges of devaluation of currency, inflation, I think, you know, despite the effort of the government and employers, including private sector and the DG of NECA is here, it is clear that there is need for improvement, you know, for the wages of the workers to cope with the level of inflation. And I want to make that point that a hungry man, a hungry worker, a hungry woman will be less tolerant and less democratic. You know, I think the best way we can really get the citizens to buy in is to address the crisis of compensation, the way Osadolo put it. And I think I'm excited that the federal government is also thinking of how to improve the pay of the public servants. But we must also address, must the pay not be linked to productivity? I think there should be. Coming from private sector, I bear witness that what I've seen now serving public sector, I think there's room for improvement in productivity. You know, but it's like chicken and egg argument, which one comes first. I think we must be able to motivate the workers very well so that they can be productive. But the last comment I want to make, and I'm happy my Lord is here, the president of NIC, National Industrial Court, it's clear that in the process of managing wages, negotiation, there will only be disputes. You know, there will always be disagreement, and they are inevitable, but we must find a way to resolve them. You know, and I think it's important that collective bargaining must be strengthened. At least to be part of this discussion. But any method that we take, we must also make sure that, you know, they do not create more problems. You know, strikes are inevitable, definitely. And the whole idea of strike is that workers have the right to withdraw their services so that they can compel employers to return back to negotiation. But when strike also gets addictive, longer than, you know, necessary, for whatever reason, including lack of collective agreements, I think it also creates its own challenges. Again, I'm just trying to provoke the audience so that we can have robust discussions, you know. So on this note, I've been told that it's better for two of us, the two institutions hosting this great conversation, it's better we listen. As a matter of fact, I'm not giving any address. I'm only about to go and sit down to listen and welcome all participants to this great conversation. Forever, thank you very much. Good morning, Nigeria.
Once again, let's appreciate the Director General of the Michael Ibodu National Institute of Labor Studies for his welcome remarks. While he was speaking, the first time he referred to the chairman of the Salaries and Wages Commission as a professor. And second time again, while he was still welcoming us to this opening ceremony, he referred to the chairman, yet still, as a professor. And Egbonta is a lawyer. So he scribbled a note and sent it right through the audience to disclaim the professorship that had been bestowed on him by the DG of the Labour Institute. So with tremendous respect to the chairman of the Salaries and Wages Commission, I would like to thank you for that correction. Once again, let's appreciate the DG of the Institute for the welcome remarks. And for us to maximize time, we will have a general recognition of a number of other dignitaries. We understand that the Vice Chair of the Industrial Arbitration Panel is here with us. We also understand that there are representatives of a number of government agencies, and the Honorable Minister of Communications on Digital Economy is being represented. The civil defense, as they are called, also being represented. along with an amalgam of other agencies. Now, let's proceed by taking goodwill messages. We'll have some goodwill messages. If you take a look at your program on page 20, we have goodwill messages from the Ebert Foundation, ILO, NLC, TUC, NECA, and the American Center for International Labor Solidarity. Please, the experience that I have from being a master of ceremonies is that sometimes when you have goodwill messages, some persons take advantage, and those goodwill messages then become like keynote addresses. Keynote addresses. We have a keynote address to be delivered by His Lordship, the President of the National Industrial Court. To maximize time and considering the number of persons that have been listed here to give a goodwill message, could you limit this to no more than 120 seconds, which is 2 minutes? If you were to advertise that on television, find out how much 60 seconds will cost you, add another 60 seconds to it, I'm sure the rational economic man will say, or rational economic woman as well, will say, no, I will opt for 60 seconds. So the same way, we'll try to maximize the time. Let me most respectfully invite the country director of the International Labour Organization, Mrs. Vanessa Pala, to deliver a goodwill message. One more time, a reminder, no more than 2 minutes. Let's welcome her, please, to the microphone.
Good morning. Let me make sure that I don't go over 2 minutes. That's quite a tight time. Allow me also to please adopt the already established protocol. I want to express gratitude as the International Labour Organization for inviting us to be part of this very important and timely discussion. And I do bring you greetings from our own DG and our Regional Director for Africa. As I said, this is a very timely and an important discussion, and I really apologize because of the change of the dates. My colleagues who would have participated in the different panel discussions, one is overseas, and hopefully another will be able to join virtually. So I'm very happy to deliver this goodwill message, just to remind us how important and essential wages are as part of income for millions of workers, their families, and their different communities. I also want to say that wages are also a cost factor when doing business, and sustainability must therefore be ensured. Of course, they depend on productivity of enterprises, as the DG of MINILS said. However, it should not be forgotten that higher salaries may also lead to high motivated workers who therefore contribute towards improving productivity. Wages are also a macroeconomic factor, or macroeconomic variable, that is playing an important role in household consumption, the development of country and its middle class, and even important in other variables such as inflation. I think the DG also, or the chairman also spoke about the issue of inflation, which is a very hot topic in current times. It is for this reason that social dialogue, as the ILO, the only tripartite UN agency, we recognize and promote negotiations or social dialogue and wage negotiations as paramount important, and therefore should be conducted with a view to promoting the welfare of workers, the sustainability of businesses, and the economic development and sustainability of the country. I also want to refer also to the importance of information, statistics, and all the relevant information that is required in order to make informed decisions around wage negotiations, which is why the ILO recommendation 163 on collective bargaining recommends access to necessary information to enable negotiators in an informed manner. Public and private employers should therefore provide information on an economic and social situation of the bargaining unit, and public power should provide the necessary information on the global socio-economic situation of the country and the branches of the economy. It is also important to define at the onset what wages are being negotiated. In case of a minimum wage, negotiation is about wage floors and not about average wages. And therefore, the different approaches to calculating wages and relevant wage levels also depends and require particular information. And of course, some levels will be higher than the others, informed by the criteria such as qualification, profession, and productivity. When talking about wage negotiations, the principle of equity or equality should also be part of the process. Negotiations will also consider gender. An recent ILO Global Report on Wages have also indicated that worldwide, women are paid on average 20% less than men. Therefore, wage negotiations can also aim at reducing inequalities between high and low earners where these are considered excessive. Finally, I hope I haven't gone through my 2 minutes. I really tried to cut my goodwill message as short as possible. Finally, it is obvious that effective wage bargaining depends on strong representative organizations to ensure the quality of the negotiations and the implementation of the results. In other words, it is necessary to help strengthen the employers and the workers' organizations. And the DG spoke about the contribution of both the NLC and NECA in such engagements. I want to commend Michael Imodu National Institute for Labor Studies and the National Salaries, Income and Compensation Commission for organizing this very important workshop, and also to discuss some of the ways to improve administration of wages and exchange and learn from one another on best practices. I look forward to the conclusion of this two-day conference. As I said, unfortunately, I will not be able to stay for the rest of the meeting today, as I have other conflicting engagement, but I'm sure our relationship with MINILS is a continuous relationship, and we will continue to support and provide whatever technical assistance and technical support that is required in order to take some of the conclusions of this very important meeting. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Vanessa Pala, Country Director of ILO here in Nigeria, for your goodwill message. One trick, if you have a written goodwill message and you can't immediately have a précis of it, just forward it or submit it to the Secretariat. We have a team of rapporteurs, and so the ideas embedded in your goodwill message can then be extracted as part of the proceedings and also conclusions at this time. Once again, thank you very much, Mrs. Pala. Let me respectfully invite the President of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Comrade Ayuba Waba, for his goodwill message. Again, honor reminder, 2 minutes, Comrade.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigeria. Well, let me respect all the well-established protocols and also convey the goodwill of the working men and women of this country that create the wealth that the bourgeoisie feed on this morning for this very important conversation. The conversation is so important because of the fact that it's central. Workers work to earn a living. And basically, the foundation of peace, as far back as 100 years ago, is about social justice and living wage. It's there clearly in the constitution of the ILO, where it canvass for the issue of social justice through the distribution of wealth, but importantly, for a living wage for people to be able to live and then take care of their family. And that's why this conversation is very important. Globally, because of the economic outlook, many countries are also looking inwards to address the challenge of wages. Because whether we like it or not, the issue of hyperinflation is ravaging economies around the world. And who are at the receiving end? Workers on fixed wages. Inflation has affected our currency. And basically, as a major importing country, you should know that workers are the receiving end. So this conversation, to me, is very, very important. But I will plead that outside conversation, we should also find a way to implement some of those things. As I speak to you, in many countries, they have also found a middle ground using the time-tested approach of the ILO, using Convention 98 and 87, which deals with the issue of the right to collective bargaining. Parties must go to the negotiating table in good faith, negotiate in good faith. And therefore, the outcome of negotiation globally is like a court judgment. No one party can sit down to reprogate an agreement that has been reached through a collective bargaining process. That's the global standard. And I think we should actually endeavor to copy some of those good practices. Yes, it is important for us to discuss the issue of wages. And Isa, as you said, where this issue of wages were started 150 years ago, that's where we're going in Melbourne to have our conference. 150 years ago, trade unions won the battle for 8 hours work a day. It was in Melbourne, Australia. And also the issue of having minimum wage as a standard, which unions then canvass around the world. So it's so central and important. And we must use empirical data to arrive at all of this, including cost of living index. Today, if you look at the cost of living in Nigeria, in fact, I don't know where we'll start, because I shared 2 days ago that a loaf of bread is now 1,000 naira, and we're talking of 30,000 minimum wage. How can families live? It's not possible. So in all the countries I visited, they have found an ingenuine way of addressing the issue. 3 weeks ago, I had the privilege of one-on-one with the president of Tunisia. He told me, no, I've just reviewed the wages across board with 10%. Same Ghana, 15%. South Africa, 15%. So we must find a way. In fact, in the midst of recession is when you need to empower people so that the economy can start to work. Because once the purchasing power of people is down and is low, the economy also will be at standstill. People will manufacture, but nobody will buy because people are so impoverished. And the principle is distribute wealth. The bottom line is also that despite the fact that wealth has more than tripled in the past 2 decades, but impoverishment have also increased. In fact, I was just looking at the report of the implementation of the MDGs, and it said clearly that African countries are only on course for only 13 indicators. And it's clear that we will not be able to meet up the goals set out in the MDGs. This is not encouraging. Not because we are not wealthy. We are wealthy. Nigeria is one of the wealthiest nations. And basically, as a major oil producing country, we ought not to be where we are. In fact, we ought to be prosperous. Many countries are laughing to the bank, those that are oil producing countries. But that one is double jeopardy. It's either they say subsidy today, or subsidy to remove tomorrow, or they say, well, something has happened. People are tapping the crude oil and selling without their knowledge. These are things that we ought to have passed this level by now. So this is part of the conversation. And part of the conversation is to fix the challenge. Fix the issue of wages. Fix the issue of the challenge in the economy. And this would be a conversation that we are so interested. So the Michael Imodu National Institute, when I will continue to commend you, because we don't expect least from you, from what you have passed through and what you have been able to add to the body of knowledge and including movement. So I think it's highly commendable, and we'll await the outcome, but I think outside the outcome is actually to push for action. And I once again thank you immensely for this opportunity, and congratulations for this very important dialogue. And lastly, let me congratulate my Lordship, Justice B.B. Kanyim, whom all of us are aware is, I think, either the second Nigerian to have been appointed by the ILO into the Committee of Experts of Eminent Jurists. He will then be representing the English-speaking West Africa on the Committee of Experts. So congratulations, my Lordship. That decision was taken at the last governing board meeting of ILO, which I attended. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, the President of the Nigerian Labour Congress. I join my voice to congratulate Honorable Justice Kanyip on your appointment. We are super proud of you. All right, very quickly for the next goodwill message, I would like to call on the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association Director General, Mr. Adewale Oyerinde. 2 minutes still stands.
Morning. Good morning. You know, when the communist president came, he said workers create wealth, and the bourgeoisie are taking it. I believe strongly, communist president, that the employers are not part of the bourgeoisie. You know, I bring warm greetings from our association, the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, and also permit me to stand on existing courtesies that have been established. You know, one of the fundamental relationships we have globally, all of us, is the workplace relationship. And just like the family relationship, you know, we bring people together, and circumstantially they are made to spend between 8, 9, 10 hours together in a place. And as much as we cherish those relationships, you know, one of the factors that creates a breach in that relationship, or that could create a breach in that relationship, is the issue of compensation. So when you come down to the issue of compensation, sometimes the center might not hold. And this conversation is coming at a time when the dynamics of our macroeconomic system globally is challenging not only employers, but also has called into question the policy choices of nations, you know, which has created the dynamics of revenue shortage, or policy systems where you have employers challenged and not able to meet their critical obligations. So we commend the Institute for this wonderful session, for this wonderful policy discussion, which is coming probably at the right time for all of us. We want to express our commitment to continue to deepen our partnership with the Institute, also express our commitment to continue to partner with the trade unions within the context of workplace relationships, because without peace, without industrial peace, we can't really create the wealth that we are all talking about. And there will always be crises, as one of the speakers have said, but leveraging on the institutionalizing of social dialogue and also all the frameworks that we have, and most especially because of our perception differs, and it will continue to differ within the context of what we define as living wage, what we call decent wage, what we call minimum wage also. Because of these perceptions that will continue to differ, but leveraging within the context of the framework that has been set even by the ILO on social dialogue, we can continue to find middle ground and create wealth for our nation. So once again, we want to thank the Institute for inviting us, and also once again express our deep commitment that, and hoping that this conversation will not end within the scope of these 2 days, because we believe strongly that this should form an input into further conversation within the context of wage, within the context of compensation, so that the worker can actually earn the living wage that he wants to earn. Let me round up with this, that as we converse in the next 2 days, we should not shy away from the critical issue of the macroeconomics in which the organized businesses operate. As much as it is ideal and businesses want to satisfy the welfare of workers, you know, certain factors within the context of the macroeconomic system also create some level of limitations for employers to achieve or to fulfill those obligations. So within 2 days, we crave our indulgence, even as we participate actively, that we deal with all those issues as they arise. So that at the end of it, we all have discussed transparently, we all have discussed in good faith, and we look back for the next 2 days and say, yes, we have actually spent 2 productive days conversing. Thank you, and let's have a wonderful session.
All right, thank you very much. Indeed, the 2-day policy forum promises to bring out the international best practices in terms of labor and wages discourse. Thank you very much, the DG of NECA. Next, I would like to call on an organization partnering with the NIMILS and the National Salaries and Income Wages Commission. I'm talking about Frederick Ebert Stiftung. I would like to respectfully call on the representative, Mr. Daniel Mann, to please give us your goodwill message. A round of applause for him.
distinguished ladies and gentlemen, dear comrades, dear Comrade Isa, sitting right in front of me. Let me also stand on the already existing protocols. It is my great honor and pleasure, as they say, to speak to you this morning, but it's also very reassuring and also making my task of only speaking too much more easier to speak after, or second after, our good comrade and friend of the foundation, Comrade Ayuba Baba, from the NLC, because I couldn't make any of the points he has already made more clear. On behalf of my organization, Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, for those of you who don't know, I know you know, the DG, has been in Nigeria for more than 45 years, partnering with our friends from the trade unions, from NLC, from TUC, even the predecessors of some of these labor centers. We have been partnering with Michael Imodo in several, I would say, instances, in a renewed partnership since last year, thanks also to the efforts of the DG, Comrade Isa Aremu. And we are very happy that MINILS was able to congregate today and tomorrow so many high-ranking representatives of so many key institutions when it comes to our discussion about compensation management and negotiation of salaries. But I don't want to leave this podium without giving at least one or two, I think Madam Moderator has said it, best practices, I'm not sure if it's best practices, more remarks on some of the things Comrade President has already touched upon. The one thing, and it has been said in the opening remarks by Comrade DG, there are a lot of actual achievements over the past 8 years. There are a lot of things being ratified, the minimum wage has been increased, a lot of things which this government of the day can be proud of. But then there's also the other side, which we have heard before, of some of these agreements who need to be made in good faith, of some of these negotiations who have been taken for long, who have been bringing together different sides of the same metal, like even the president of NECA has told us. And then at the end of the day, the question is, will both parties keep up to the same promise? And will each promise we made here today also keep up with the times towards implementation? 30,000 Naira minimum wage cannot sustain anybody in this day and age. We are not only talking about living wages, we are talking about decent wages, but if you can't even live from your wage, how can this economic contribution be sustainable? If you can't feed your family, how can you be motivated to work in your workplace, be it in the public sector or the private sector? And against this background, in this day and age, which, as people before me have said, brings a lot of nations across the continent and also across the world to think about the future of their economies, one thing I really want to get behind on behalf of FES is that if you want to have any development, if you want to have any sustained peace in any country, without socio-economic distribution, there can't be no future for any of those. So those, I think, are some of the leading thoughts that should guide all of you in all the discussions to come when it comes about wages, when it comes about compensation management, and when it comes about how to ensure that the wealth of Nigeria, which is created by its workers, is equally distributed and it serves to the good purpose of all. With that being said, we as FES stand both in our partnership with the trade unions of this country, in our partnership with MINILS, and in our shared commitment to increase the socio-economic prosperity of Nigeria, but not only Nigeria as a nation, but especially the people of Nigeria and the workers of Nigeria. So with that being said, please be considerate. I wish you very fruitful and very open discussions and good results. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Daniel Mann, the Nigeria country rep of FES, for the goodwill message. We're going to have just one more goodwill message, but I crave your indulgence to take a look briefly at page 20 of your program. We're having to skip some of the items of the opening ceremony. After this last goodwill message, we will then take the keynote address by His Lordship, Honorable Justice Kanye, President of the National Industrial Courts. And thereafter, we will have the address from the Secretary to the Government of the Federation here represented, as well as the formal declaration of the opening of the two-day policy forum. So once again, we are taking just one more goodwill message. And if you take a look also at the technical sessions, there are 8 technical sessions, 4 today and 4 tomorrow. So if you were previously listed to deliver a goodwill message or have other intervention at this opening ceremony, you still have the opportunity at the technical session to make your pitch. On that note, let me respectfully invite the chairman of ICPC, Professor Bolaji Owasoye, to take 2 minutes to give a goodwill message, and thereafter my colleague will introduce our keynote speaker. Prof.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kingsley Osadolo. All protocols duly observed. I want to congratulate the Michael Imodu Institute and my predecessor in office for putting this together. I actually decided to come for this event because it's the first one he's inviting me to since I resumed, and he has attended quite a number of, so I felt morally obliged. Some of the things I would like to say in my short 2 minutes have been covered, so I'm going to skip. I'll just go to my concluding thoughts. One, I think that government needs to rebalance the workforce in order to realize a compensation system that is fair and aligns with productivity. In other words, I align myself with some of the points that have been made about the need for fair compensation, the need for collective bargaining, and all that. What has been missing is that there must be productivity. I think Comrade Issa Aremu did mention it. You can't share what has not been produced. So it's critical to mention that. But I want to flag the fact that the workforce, especially the public sector, is misaligned. It's groaning under the scourge of fake employment, ghost workers, and wrong skill mix. Now, a number of anti-corruption initiatives have over time pruned down the number of ghost workers, but the malady of fake recruitment is work in progress, with ICPC, the head of the civil service, and the Federal Civil Service Commission working together to tackle these maladies. But there remains the challenge with redistribution or realignment of public sector skills to meet the needs of government for that productivity that we're talking about. Some critical sectors of government are under-resourced in human capital, while others have redundant surpluses. It is highly questionable that the right skill mix is being achieved in the public service as at today. For example, ICPC investigation shows that in some federal medical centers, support and administrative staff are much more than core medical professionals, almost by a ratio of 3 to 1. 3 to 1. Thus, government is paying in one agency about 2/3 of staff that are basically adding no value and cannot produce to service delivery or the core mandate of the institution, but rather they complicate the bureaucracy in a bid to find something to do. By implication, everyone, especially the core professionals, are underpaid because of the baggage of irrelevant excess workload. So we need to resolve this kind of anomaly. It underscores the importance of this conversation. So while we're discussing compensation management, we must be honest, and I think Chairman Ekunta had said that it should be a free conversation. We must be honest to discuss the things that will facilitate and enable fair compensation. The reality, of course, is that the chicken is come home to roost. We have to confront and deal with these anomalies. In other words, the things I've skipped, and I will share my short goodwill with the organizers as Kingsley has advised. Some of the things I've skilled address some of the issues that have been raised. I want to encourage the Michael Imodu Institute for Labor Studies to take up this research about the right skills mix. That would be a major contribution to improving this conversation. I want to wish you all very fruitful deliberations and practicable, actionable outcomes to overcome these challenges in the collective interest of our country. Thank you very much.
The chairman of the ICPC, Professor Bolaji Wansonye, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Thank you very much. And indeed, when the session starts, the technical sessions, the promises to be no hold back. Let's tell ourselves the blanket truth and see how we can move forward. In a moment, I'll introduce our special guest of honor, our keynote speaker. But very quickly, I have been asked to recognize and appreciate the resource persons who will be chairing the technical sessions. We have Dr. Mrs. Famo, Professor Dafi Otobo, Ambassador Abdullahi Bagi, Dr. John Onarewaju, Professor Ifeanyi Oyenoru, Barrister Olivia Neka Meadi, Barrister Malaki, and of course other high-powered repertoire team, and of course every other person present here. Thank you very much for taking your time to be with us. It's time for us to listen to our keynote speaker, one whom most speakers who have come up here have spoken so highly of. Also, I wouldn't want to run through his very intimidating resume. I would just like to announce to us that he is the President, National Industrial Court of Nigeria, and member of the ILO Committee of Experts in the application of conventions and recommendations. He is Honorable Justice Benedict Kanyim, President of the Nigerian Industrial Court, National Industrial Court. Thank you.
She's already complaining that the speech is lengthy. The chairman of session, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, there are quite a number of heads of government institutions, agencies, parastatals here. It will be idle to begin to name one after the other. But of course, the chair of ICPC, I had started calling him chairman long before he became chairman when we were at the institute. And NAPTIR DG. Somehow all of us share the same relationship. They used to advance legal studies before we all went our various ways. I must thank the organizers. Maybe complain first, because when initially they asked me to do this, they gave me so little a time. I was wondering whether I'll be able to cope. We were neck deep in preparing for the legal year. So you can imagine how happy I was when they moved it to today, because that gave me some time to be able to put down something. What I have here are my thoughts. I'm invited in 2 capacities, or is it 3? The letter says I'm special guest of honor. It says I'm keynote speaker, and it says I'm a panelist. I just hope I'll survive all 3. When I accepted to do this keynote address, I organized on 2 issues. I have already told you the first one, the problem of time. The second was that I was at a loss what to do with compensation management. Yes, I'm a labor court judge, trained to resolve disputes. The DG of Michael Imodu Institute says he's looking forward to NICN resolving disputes. That's our primary work. I acknowledge we have jurisdiction over payment of wages, but what human resources people factor in to arrive at a compensation package is hardly something that is litigated upon. For instance, throughout my 22 years at NICN, I only did 1 case on minimum wage. And that case is the case of Ogun State Attorney General versus NLC, Osun State Chapter. I will talk more on this case later in this address. So like I pointed out, I heaved a sigh of relief when I was told they moved this forum to 14th and 15th of this month. That is today and tomorrow. So what you're going to hear represents my thoughts on the subject. I start off as lawyers would generally do, that the theme of the conference is the need to resolve dilemmas and reinforce milestones. That fact alone intuits a paradox in compensation management in the country. Take, for instance, a dictionary definition of dilemma is a situation in which a difficult choice has to be made between two or more alternatives, especially equally undesirable ones, and a difficult situation or problem. Now, the same dictionary would define milestone as an action or event marking a significant change or stage in development. And so, compensation management in the country presents to us difficult situations or problems or choices to make. In fact, choices that may be undesirable. At the same time, it presents to us a positive, significant change in the development of the country and its workforce. But then what is compensation management? And I quote a commentator who said, "It is the discipline for determining employees' appropriate pay and benefits, a critical element in talent management and employee retention, which uses financial and non-monetary benefits to attract recruits, reduce turnover, spur performance, and boost employee engagement." With the ILO, minimum wage and working time standards and respect for equality can translate into greater satisfaction and improved performance for workers and reduced staff turnover. In a manner that the beneficial effects of labor standards do not go unnoticed by foreign investors. Studies at that level show that in their criteria for choosing countries in which to invest, foreign investors rank workforce quality and political and social stability above low labor costs. Now, foreign investors may not rank low labor costs that high, yet managing labor costs is a key objective of compensation management. And so, ensuring that salaries and perquisites of office are competitive is a major benefit of the compensation management. A good compensation management system, therefore, is alert to market changes, which can help with attracting and retaining employees. This can help save money on recruitment and training costs. The point is that in general, the right mix of compensation can motivate employees to improve their performance, productivity, and creativity. All of this can boost an organization's revenue, efficiency, and ultimately its profitability. As the adage goes, a happy employee is a productive employee. And the compensation management package is central to this. But aside from its literal connotation, that's the adage about a happy employee being a productive employee, it conjures up something more profound, i.e. the realization that harsh or unjust labor conditions could produce unrest so great that the peace and harmony of the world are imperiled. This reason is actually at the very core of the Treaty of Versailles, entered into after the First World War, which treaty set up the ILO, with the mandate to improve the conditions of workers by assisting in establishing rules governing labor conditions, including compensation management. Since peace can be established only if based on social and economic justice, the drafters of the treaty reasoned that labor conditions are key to the sustainable development of societies. In fact, humane conditions of work improve staff morale and so stimulate productivity, something beneficial to the economy. The general saying is that labor is not a commodity. and this statement is attributable to Pope Leo XIII, who in 1891, his encyclica called Rerum Novarum, but made more famously by its adoption by the ILO preachment in terms of the decent work agenda, which insists that workers have dignity and rights and so deserve respect in the world of work. Labor may not be like other goods and services that can be bought or sold in the market. But while labor may respond to higher wages, this may not be in the economy's sense of demand and supply. Accordingly, the idea that higher prices would stimulate additional supply wasn't one people associated with the labor market. For instance, after the Industrial Revolution, wages rose, but working hours fell. This led to concern that the more workers were paid, the less they worked, dissipating their higher wages in habits such as drinking and fornication. I note that the traditional protection of labor law is under fire. Criticisms have been leveled on this protection, seen as rigid, and so an obstacle to development, innovation, productivity, and attractiveness of foreign investment. And that the information that have in the past years affected economy, society, science, and technology have given us a world that is profoundly different from the one in which fundamental categories of labor law have been created and defined. Employers, in the quest to have a flexible labor market, have devised new forms of work just so that the protection of labor law is avoided, and in wage negotiation, employers wield excessive power. A commentator, in fact, thanks to the president of NLC who gave me the book, in his seminal work identified 7 challenges that the future of work faces: globalization and deglobalization, climate and ecological transition, inequality, demography and migration, automation and digitalization, new forms of work and new business models. These challenges all impact on competition management in the workplace in this manner. 1. Our global life encourages the search for greener pastures across the countries. 2. Climate and ecological transition intuits that there can be no jobs on a dead planet in the first place. 3. Labor market inequalities yield to working poverty, wages not following productivity, in so much that if capitalism's globalization does not become just, it will destroy itself. 4. Countries are losing skilled labor through migration. It is unclear if expensive and less productive older persons should be retained in service, and what compensation package as to pension rights should be allowed post-employment. 5. Remote work. Here you find digitalization is producing a world of firms that lack a location and do not employ the people who work for them. As such, remote work is prompting some organizations to change compensation strategies. Keeping salaries competitive in an era of flexible and hybrid work is becoming more complicated. 6. The growth of precarious work means that work and private life is now blurred. The salaried employee is now supplanted by freelance, and it raises the question whether the end of payroll and employment relationship has arrived. The second question raised is whether platform work is not a system of exploitation. Lastly, globalization has encouraged the increasing financialization of companies, the focus on short-term financial returns, which cause increasing inequality. the concentration by companies on short-term investments as against long-term investments, which is necessary for sustainability of the company and for employment, is doing more harm than good. So, when designing a compensation system, the following objectives must be borne in mind. A, to attract competent and qualified persons towards the organization by offering fair wage and incentive. B, retain present employees by paying competitive remuneration. C, establish fair and equitable remuneration so as to avoid pay disparities. D, improve production, productivity and profitability of the organization. E, minimize unnecessary expenditure and control costs through a device of internal check and establishment of standard. F, improve and maintain good human relations between employer and employee through a process of payment of bonus, profit sharing, and other fringe benefits. G, enhance the name and fame of the company through a proper system of wage payment. H, ensure prompt and regular payment of wage and salary to all employees. Now, the legal framework that should determine the compensation system in the workplace must start with legislative competence. And here we find item 34 of the exclusive legislative list, which I'm sure we are familiar with. It provides that labor, including trade unions, industrial relations, conditions, safety and welfare of labor, industrial disputes, prescribing a national minimum wage for the Federation on any part of it, and industrial arbitrations fall within the competence of the legislative competence of the federal government. Accordingly, state houses of assembly cannot legislate on any of them. In like manner, pensions, gratuities, and other like benefits payable out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund or any other public funds of the Federation in item 44 of the exclusive legislative list are also exclusive to the National Assembly. Does this make the Pension Reform Act 2014, which also covers private sector employees, unconstitutional? I venture to answer in the negative. This is because pension, gratuities, and like benefits qualify as employment rights even when they inure post-employment. As employment rights, they come under the rubric labor, which can be seen under item 34 of the exclusive legislative list. I now move to section 17.3 in chapter 2 of the 1999 Constitution, which heralds what the policy direction, a policy direction that must also impact on the workplace of the state. And this is what it says. The state shall direct its policy towards ensuring that A, all citizens without discrimination on any group whatsoever have the opportunity for securing adequate means of livelihood, as well as adequate opportunity to secure suitable employment. B, conditions of work are just and humane, and that there are adequate facilities for leisure and for social, religious, and cultural lives. C, health, safety, and welfare of all persons in employment are safeguarded and not endangered or abused. D, there are adequate medical and health facilities for all persons. E, there is equal pay for equal work without discrimination on account of sex or any other ground whatsoever. F, children, young persons, and the aged are protected against any exploitation whatsoever and against moral and material neglect. Now, join this with international instruments such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic and Cultural Rights, the Convention on the Elimination of All Discrimination Against Women, and the African Charter of Human and People's Rights, which Nigeria ratified, and so in virtue of Section 254C1F, H, and 2 of the 1999 Constitution can be applied by the National Industrial Court when adjudicating, you will reveal a number of additional rights. Just so that we save time, I won't read out those rights, but the point I simply want to make is simple. that if you look at these international instruments, for instance, you find running through them the right to work, which unfortunately is something that is in Chapter 2, what we say is not justiciable in Nigeria. But because these international instruments make provision for the right to work, it signifies that states are enjoined to ensure fair wages, equal pay for equal work, and equal remuneration for work of equal value. Workers should be guaranteed a minimum wage that allows for a decent living for themselves and their families. Working conditions must be safe, healthy, and not demeaning to human dignity. Employees must be provided with reasonable work hours, adequate rest and leisure time, as well as periodic paid holiday. Now, Section 17 of the 1999 Constitution, like I pointed out, comes under Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which deals with the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policy. And if you look at Section 13, it enjoins all organs of government and all authorities and persons exercising legislative, executive, or judicial powers to conform to, observe, and apply the provisions of Chapter 2 of the Constitution. But Section 6, subsection 6.6 says, it provides that judicial power shall not, except as otherwise provided by the Constitution, extend to any issue or question as to whether any act or omission by any authority or person, or as to whether any law or any judicial decision is in conformity with the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policy. In other words, except otherwise provided by the Constitution itself, everything in Chapter 2, as lawyers would want to say, are non-justiciable. But to the extent that the 1999 Constitution allows a provision granting a right in Chapter 2 of the Constitution can be justiciable. I earlier referred to Section 254C1FH and 2, the provision that allows the National Industrial Court to apply international best practices and conventions ratified by Nigeria. What then this means is that workplace rights, including the right to work and be paid fair wages enshrined in Chapter 2 of the 1999 Constitution, can be justiciable, but only at the National Industrial Court in virtue of Nigeria's ratified conventions. How then has the NICN treated these workplace rights? At the NICN, we see the right to work as not just the right to be employed, but to be given work when employed. The right to wages inheres from that right to work. We are accustomed to the adage that a laborer deserves his wages. Section 15 of the Labour Act, for instance, provides that wages shall become due and payable at the end of each period for which the contract is expressed to subsist, that is to say, daily, weekly, or at such other period as may be agreed upon, provided that where the period is more than 1 month, the wages shall become due and payable at intervals not exceeding 1 month. But like I noted in one of the cases I handled, Section 15 of the Labour Act deals with periodicity of payment of wages. It does not deal with the fairness of the wages, nor does it seek to grant a right to wages for any period that work was not done, whether or not the employment contract is expressed to exist. This aside, there is no taking away the fact that an employee has the right to be paid for work done, in so much that the new dispensation is that whether termination or dismissal is wrong or not, all earnings of an employee prior to the dismissal must be paid by the employer to such an employee. But what amounts to wages or salary must be clearly stated. In one of the cases I handled, the question was whether allowance was salary. The instrument appointing the person simply says you are entitled to this allowance. Nothing was said about salary. And what I held was that an allowance is not itself the salary. Salary is different. So if the contract was simply for allowance without a salary, then it cannot rank as an employment relationship. Every now and then we hear of labor's refrain, often a prelude to an industrial action. Our take-home pay cannot even take us home. This is the clamor for fair, decent, and living wages, something that is always the case when there is a strike on minimum wage. The judges whose salaries have not been reviewed since 2008, which salaries have accordingly remained stagnant since then, have joined the fray in this call. Section 254C1E of the 1999 Constitution gives the NIC exclusive jurisdiction over civil causes and matters relating to or connected with any dispute arising from national minimum wage of the Federation or any part thereof, and matters connected or arising therefrom. In the Ogun State case I referred to earlier, the question was whether the then national minimum wage was intended to increase the salary of workers generally, with 18,000 naira being the benchmark on which to erect a new salary structure, or whether only a category of workers is intended to benefit from the minimum wage. In resolving the issue, the NICN, referring to the work of two others who did a study on minimum wage, held that there is nothing fundamentally wrong with the National Minimum Wage Act 2004 as amended in delimiting the scope of workers that it applies to. In that case, the NICN acknowledged, and it is still the case today because none had come before the court again, that the National Minimum Wage Act only sets out the minimum benchmark of wages, and those it defines as entitled beneficiaries cannot earn any sum lower than the minimum benchmark. But the National Minimum Wage Act does not foreclose an increase over and above the minimum benchmark. In fact, if you look at Section 3 of the Act, it says that any agreement for the payment of wages less than the national minimum wage is void. Implicitly, the court